Imagine this. You wake up tomorrow morning, and there, on your nightstand, sits a glass jar filled with marbles, exactly 29, 0 of them. Each marble represents a day of your life, if you live to be 80. As you stare at this jar, a peculiar thing happens. You can see through the glass that roughly a third of the marbles have already turned to dust, gone, vanished. Those were your childhood, your teenage years, perhaps your 20s and beyond. The remaining marbles seem suddenly, impossibly precious. But here's where the scenario becomes truly disturbing. As you watch, mesmerized and horrified, you notice that every few seconds, another marble silently crumbles to nothing. Today, we are going to explore how understanding the true value of time can transform the way you live, give meaning to every moment, and reshape your perception of existence itself. And I promise you, the last insight we will discuss will be the most powerful of them all, one that can completely change your relationship with life. Before we begin, if you find value in deep reflections like this, inspired by philosophers, psychologists, and great thinkers who dared to question the nature of human existence, make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and share this video. I promise you, the revelations ahead may shift the way you see your past, your present, and your future. Time is not just a measure on a clock. Time is the very fabric of your life. Now imagine reaching for your phone, as you do every morning, and spending the next hour scrolling through an endless feed of strangers' curated lives. As you scroll, you watch 3 more marbles turn to dust. You've just traded 3 irreplaceable days of your existence for absolutely nothing of lasting value. No growth, no connection, no meaning. Just the hollow satisfaction of staying busy while your life evaporates before your eyes. This is not a metaphor. This is the reality you live every single day. Except the jar is invisible, and the crumbling marbles make no sound as they disappear forever. The Roman philosopher Seneca, writing nearly 2,000 years ago, observed something that would chill you to the bone if you truly understood it. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. He lived in a world without smartphones, without Netflix, without the 1,000 digital distractions that colonize your attention every waking moment. Yet even then, he watched people sleepwalk through their days, handing over their most precious resource, their time, to pursuits that brought them neither joy nor meaning. But here's the paradox that will haunt you once you see it clearly. We guard our money with fierce intensity, setting budgets, tracking expenses, fighting for every dollar we earn. We protect our possessions with locks, alarms, and insurance policies. We defend our reputations with careful words and calculated actions. Yet we give away our time, the one thing more valuable than all our possessions combined, as carelessly as a drunk person scattering coins in the street. Why? Why do we protect what can be replaced while squandering what can never be recovered? The answer reveals a truth so unsettling that most people spend their entire lives running from it. We treat time as infinite because confronting its finite nature would force us to examine how we're actually living. It would demand that we ask uncomfortable questions about whether our daily choices align with our deepest values. It would require us to admit that many of the things we call important are elaborate distractions from the terrifying freedom and responsibility of being truly alive. Think about your last week. Can you remember Tuesday? What made Thursday different from any other Thursday you've lived? How many hours dissolved into activities you can't even recall? This isn't absent-mindedness. This is the sound of your life disappearing while you sleep through it, even with your eyes wide open. The most successful people in the world cannot buy back yesterday. The most powerful cannot extend today. The most intelligent cannot slow down tomorrow's arrival. Time is the great equalizer, the one currency that makes billionaires and paupers equally vulnerable. Yet, instead of treating it with the reverence it deserves, we act as if we have an endless supply, as if life is a dress rehearsal for some grander performance that will begin later. But what if this casual relationship with time isn't just wasteful? What if it's the very reason your life feels hollow, directionless, or perpetually postponed? What if the meaning you're searching for isn't hiding in some distant future achievement or exotic destination, but buried beneath the layers of unconscious time wasting that has become your default mode of existence? The stakes couldn't be higher, and the clock couldn't be more merciless. Every second you spend engaging with these ideas is a second you will never have again. The question that should terrify and liberate you in equal measure is this: What are you willing to do with this irreversible truth? Because once you truly grasp what time actually is, not just conceptually, but in your bones, everything changes. Your priorities reorganize themselves. Your tolerance for meaningless activities vanishes. Your relationships deepen or end. Your work transforms from obligation to expression. And life, which once felt like a series of random events you had to endure, becomes a masterpiece you are consciously creating with each deliberate choice. But first, you must understand why you've been unconsciously programmed to waste the very thing you can least afford to lose. The reason you squander time isn't a character flaw, it's a survival mechanism gone horribly wrong. Deep in your brain, an ancient system designed to keep your ancestors alive in a world of immediate physical threats now conspires against you in a world of infinite digital distractions. This system, what neuroscientists call the default mode network, constantly scans for novelty, for the next thing, for anything that might signal opportunity or danger. It was perfect for hunting and gathering. It's devastating for a meaningful life. Carl Jung understood this internal sabotage when he wrote about the shadow, those parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. But there's a shadow even deeper than the personal one. The collective shadow of modern civilization that has taught you to fear stillness, to equate busyness with importance, and to mistake motion for progress. You live in a culture that profits from your distraction, that has weaponized your attention span and monetized your impulses. Consider this uncomfortable truth. Every app on your phone, every streaming service, every social media platform employs teams of neuroscientists and behavioral psychologists whose sole job is to make their product irresistible. They study your brain's reward pathways, like military strategists studying enemy territory. They know exactly which combinations of colors, sounds, and notifications will trigger dopamine releases that override your conscious decision-making. You're not lacking willpower, you're fighting a war against adversaries who understand your mind better than you do. But the programming runs deeper than technology. Friedrich Nietzsche observed that most people live what he called the herd mentality, following social scripts written by others, never questioning whether these scripts serve their authentic selves. You've been conditioned from childhood to believe that productivity equals worth, that being busy means being important, that your value is measured by your output rather than your depth of experience. This conditioning creates what Viktor Frankl called an existential vacuum, a profound emptiness that no amount of busy work can fill. In his observations from the concentration camps, Frankl noticed that those who survived weren't necessarily the physically strongest, but those who maintained a clear sense of meaning and purpose. Those without meaning, he observed, would literally waste away, even when their physical needs were met. The existential vacuum manifests in modern life as what we might call temporal anesthesia, the unconscious need to numb yourself against the weight of existence through constant stimulation. You fill every quiet moment with podcasts, music, or mindless scrolling, not because these activities bring you joy, but because silence forces you to confront questions you're not ready to answer. Am I living the life I actually want? Are my days adding up to something meaningful? If I died tomorrow, would I feel proud of how I spent my time? Jean-Paul Sartre wrote that we are condemned to be free, and this freedom terrifies us because it makes us responsible for every choice, every moment, every day. It's easier to surrender that freedom to the algorithms, to the expectations of others, to the cultural narratives that tell you how you should spend your time. But every moment you abdicate this responsibility is a moment you trade your authentic life for someone else's vision of who you should be. Arthur Schopenhauer identified what he called the will to live, an unconscious drive that keeps us moving forward even when we don't know where we're going. But in modern life, this will has been hijacked by what we might call the will to stay busy. You confuse motion with meaning, activity with aliveness. You schedule every hour not because each activity serves a purpose, but because an empty calendar feels like a judgment on your worth. The psychological roots run even deeper into what Carl Jung called the collective unconscious shared patterns of behavior that transcend individual experience. Your relationship with time has been shaped by generations of ancestors who lived in scarcity, who had to constantly work to survive. But you've inherited their urgency without their clarity of purpose. You rush through life as if you were still being chased by predators, but the only thing chasing you now is the phantom of your own unreflective existence. This is why time management techniques fail. This is why productivity systems eventually crumble. You cannot solve a spiritual problem with mechanical solutions. The issue isn't that you need better tools to manage time, it's that you've lost touch with why time matters in the first place. You've been taught to optimize your schedule while forgetting to examine whether that schedule is leading you toward or away from the life you actually want to live. The hidden tragedy is that this programming doesn't just steal your time, it steals your capacity to recognize what time actually is, the raw material from which you craft your identity, your relationships, your legacy, and your soul's deepest expression. When you waste time unconsciously, you're not just losing hours, you're losing the very substance from which meaning is made. The most devastating consequences of our unconscious relationship with time aren't the obvious ones, the missed deadlines, the forgotten birthdays, the projects left unfinished. The real damage happens in the invisible realm of what psychologists call opportunity cost. Not just what you lose, but what you never even realize you could have gained. Every hour you spend in mindless scrolling is an hour you don't spend in deep conversation with someone you love. Every evening lost to Netflix is an evening you don't spend learning a skill that could transform your career, your creativity, or your understanding of yourself. Every weekend dissolved in recovery from a week you barely remember living is a weekend you don't spend exploring, creating, or simply being fully present to the miracle of your own existence. But the mathematics of loss goes deeper than simple addition and subtraction. Time waste operates through what behavioral economists call compound loss. Each wasted moment doesn't just disappear. It prevents the exponential growth that comes from intentional living. When you invest time consciously in relationships, skills, health, or meaningful work, the returns multiply over years and decades. A single conversation might spark a lifelong friendship. An hour of practice might be the difference between mediocrity and mastery. A moment of presence might become a memory that sustains you for decades. The neurological consequences are equally profound. Your brain, that magnificent pattern recognition machine, is constantly rewiring itself based on how you spend your time. Every moment of distraction strengthens neural pathways associated with distraction. Every choice to reach for your phone, instead of sitting with discomfort, trains your brain to seek escape rather than engagement. You're not just wasting time, you're literally reshaping your consciousness in ways that make meaningful living increasingly difficult. This rewiring creates what neuroscientists call continuous partial attention, a state where you're always somewhat distracted, never fully present to anything. You live in a perpetual state of mental fragmentation, where your attention is scattered across multiple streams of information, preventing the deep focus necessary for genuine insight, creativity, or connection. You become a stranger to your own inner life because you've trained yourself to look everywhere except inward. The cultural conditioning runs so deep that most people don't even recognize when they're living unconsciously. You sleepwalk through conversations while mentally composing emails. You consume meals while scrolling through feeds, never tasting your food or noticing your body's signals. You walk through beautiful environments while listening to podcasts, missing the changing light, the quality of air, the subtle symphony of life happening around you every moment. This unconscious living creates what philosophers call temporal alienation. You become disconnected from the natural rhythms of your own existence. You lose touch with the seasons of your inner life, the ebb and flow of your energy, the subtle signals that tell you when to rest, when to push forward, when to reflect, when to act. Instead, you live according to external schedules imposed by others, by technology, by cultural expectations that have nothing to do with your authentic needs or natural cycles. Perhaps most tragic of all is what this does to your relationships, not just with others, but with yourself. When you're never fully present, you miss the subtle communications that create intimacy. You miss the micro-expressions that reveal what someone really means. You miss the moments of vulnerability when hearts open and deep connection becomes possible. Your relationships become functional rather than transformational, transactional rather than transcendent. The compound effect of this unconscious living is a life that feels hollow at its core, no matter how busy or accomplished you become. You achieve goals that leave you feeling empty because you weren't fully present while pursuing them. You accumulate experiences that don't enrich you because you weren't truly there to receive them. You live a life that looks successful from the outside, but feels meaningless from within. This is the true price of temporal unconsciousness. Not just wasted time, but a wasted life. Not just missed opportunities, but the gradual erosion of your capacity to recognize opportunities when they arise. Not just distraction, but the slow death of your ability to be truly alive to your own existence. The question that should haunt and motivate you is this: how much of your life have you already missed while you were physically present but mentally absent? And more importantly, how much more are you willing to lose before you decide to wake up? The path to reclaiming your time begins with a radical act of rebellion, not against the world, but against the unconscious patterns that have colonized your consciousness. This rebellion starts with a single revolutionary question that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. What would I do with my time if I weren't afraid? Fear, you see, is the invisible puppeteer pulling the strings of your temporal choices. Fear of missing out drives you to say yes to everything. Fear of being alone with your thoughts drives you to constant stimulation. Fear of confronting your mortality drives you to live as if you have infinite time. Fear of your own potential drives you to stay busy with trivial pursuits rather than risk discovering what you're truly capable of creating. The ancient Stoics understood this rebellion intimately. Marcus Aurelius, who had every reason to be distracted by the demands of ruling an empire, developed what we might call temporal sovereignty, the ability to own his attention completely, regardless of external circumstances. In his private journal, which became the Meditations, he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This power over mind begins with what Seneca called examining life, the practice of conscious reflection that transforms unconscious living into intentional existence. But this isn't the gentle self-reflection taught in wellness circles. This is a fierce, uncompromising investigation into how you actually spend your days versus how you claim to value your life. The first step in this rebellion is what we might call temporal accounting, tracking not just where your time goes, but how you feel about where it goes. For 1 week, without changing anything, simply observe. Notice when you feel most alive and when you feel most drained. Notice which activities leave you energized and which leave you empty. Notice the gap between your stated values and your lived priorities. This accounting will likely reveal an uncomfortable truth. Much of what you call necessary is actually habitual, and much of what you call impossible is actually a choice. You'll discover that the time you spend complaining about having no time could be spent creating the life you want. You'll realize that many of your commitments exist not because they serve your authentic goals, but because you haven't developed the courage to disappoint others in service of your own becoming. The second phase of rebellion involves what philosopher Greg McKeown calls essentialism, the disciplined pursuit of less but better. This isn't about productivity hacking or time management tricks. This is about developing what we might call existential clarity, knowing with bone-deep certainty what deserves your irreplaceable life, energy, and what doesn't. Essentialism requires you to become comfortable with what economists call opportunity cost, understanding that every yes contains 1,000 no's. When you say yes to scrolling social media, you're saying no to reading something that might expand your mind. When you say yes to staying late at a job that doesn't fulfill you, you're saying no to the evening you could spend with people you love or pursuing work that matters to you. The most powerful tool in this rebellion is learning to say no without guilt or extensive explanation. No becomes a complete sentence. No becomes an act of self-respect. No becomes the guardian of your authentic life. But this requires developing what might be called temporal courage, the willingness to disappoint others in order to honor your deepest values. Historical examples of this rebellion illuminate its power. Virginia Woolf carved out hours each morning for writing by refusing social engagements that drained her creative energy. Einstein famously wore the same clothes every day to eliminate decision fatigue and preserve mental energy for physics. Darwin scheduled his creative work during his peak energy hours and protected that time as fiercely as others protect their money. But the ultimate rebellion isn't about optimizing your schedule, it's about optimizing your consciousness. It's about developing what we might call presence practice. The ability to be fully where you are, when you are there. This means when you're with someone you love, you're actually with them, not mentally elsewhere. When you're working on something meaningful, you're fully absorbed in it. When you're walking, you're present to the experience of walking. This rebellion transforms time from something that happens to you into something you consciously create with. You stop being a victim of circumstances and become the author of your days. You stop reacting to life and start responding to it. Most importantly, you stop postponing meaning and start creating it in real time, with the choices you make moment by moment. Here is the truth that will either liberate you completely or terrify you into deeper unconsciousness. Time doesn't exist in the way you think it does. The past is nothing more than neural patterns in your brain memories that exist only in this present moment. The future is nothing more than imagination projections that exist only in this present moment. The only time that has ever existed, the only time that will ever exist, is now. This isn't philosophical wordplay. This is the fundamental nature of reality that mystics, physicists, and enlightened beings have pointed toward for millennia. Einstein proved that time is relative, that it bends and warps depending on your perspective and speed. But even more profound than physics is psychology. Your experience of time is entirely constructed by your consciousness. When you're fully absorbed in meaningful activity, hours pass like minutes. When you're bored or suffering, minutes feel like hours. The revolutionary implication is this: if time is a construction of consciousness, then by changing your consciousness, you can transform your experience of time itself. You can make a single day contain more life, more presence, more meaning than most people experience in months of unconscious living. You can make an ordinary Tuesday feel as rich and significant as the most important days of your life. But this realization demands everything of you. If there is only now, then every moment you spend elsewhere in regret about the past or anxiety about the future is a moment you're not actually living. You're trading your one real possession, this present moment, for ghosts and shadows. You're spending your life savings on investments that don't exist. The Stoic emperor Marcus Aurelius understood this when he wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." But he wasn't advocating for mindless hedonism or ignoring consequences. He was pointing toward the profound truth that all power, all choice, all possibility exists only in this moment. The past cannot be changed. The future cannot be controlled. But this moment, this eternal, ever-present now, is where your life actually happens. Consider what this means for how you've been living. Every moment you've spent ruminating over past failures was a moment you could have been creating new successes. Every hour you've spent worrying about future problems was an hour you could have been building the skills, relationships, and wisdom needed to handle whatever comes. Every day you've spent waiting for life to begin was a day your life was actually happening, unnoticed and unappreciated. The most profound shift occurs when you realize that death isn't something that happens at the end of life. Death is happening every moment you're not fully alive. Every moment of unconscious living is a small death, a piece of your existence that vanishes without ever being truly experienced. But the flip side is equally true. Every moment of full presence is a resurrection, a rebirth into the vividness and immediacy of being alive. This understanding dissolves the fear that drives most human suffering. If you're fully present to this moment, death loses its terror because you're not postponing life until some imagined future. You're not saving up your aliveness for when conditions are perfect. You're spending it now, investing it in the only time that exists, the eternal present that is always available to you. Zen master Huang Po taught, "Your everyday mind that is the way." He wasn't describing a special state of consciousness you need to achieve through years of meditation. He was pointing to the ordinary miracle of awareness that is always, already here. The breath you're breathing right now. The sensation of your body in space. The awareness that is aware of your thoughts. This is the portal to eternal life, not life that goes on forever, but life that is so fully lived that it touches the timeless. When you grasp this truth experientially, not just intellectually, everything changes. You stop rushing toward imaginary destinations and start savoring the journey that is always happening. You stop treating the present as a stepping stone to somewhere else and recognize it as the destination itself. You realize that the life you've been preparing for, waiting for, working toward, has been available to you every moment you've been alive. The practical implications are staggering. If this moment is all you have, then how you spend it becomes the most important decision you'll ever make. If presence is the key to a meaningful life, then developing the ability to be present becomes your most crucial skill. If now is eternal, then whatever you're doing now, reading these words, breathing, existing is already sacred, already complete, already enough. This is Seneca's deepest teaching, hidden within his observations about time's value. When you understand that time isn't something you have, but something you are, When you recognize that your life isn't happening in time, but as time, you stop trying to manage time and start learning to be time fully, completely, without reservation. And in that being, meaning isn't something you find or create or achieve. Meaning is what naturally emerges when you stop abandoning the present moment for phantom alternatives. Meaning is the inevitable result of being fully alive to the life you're already living. Meaning is what happens when you finally come home to the only time, the only place, the only existence you'll ever have. This eternal, precious, unrepeatable now. The great paradox of time is that only by embracing its finite nature, really feeling in your bones that each moment will never come again, do you discover the infinite depths contained within each present moment. Only by accepting that you will die do you learn how to truly live. Only by understanding that time is limited do you access the unlimited richness of timeless presence. This is why Seneca wrote that life is long enough if you know how to use it. He wasn't talking about adding years to your life. He was talking about adding life to your moments. He was pointing toward the secret that transforms ordinary existence into extraordinary living. The complete, wholehearted embrace of what is, when it is, where you are. In the end, the value of time isn't measured in minutes or hours or years. It's measured in presence, in awareness, in the depth of your engagement with the miracle of being alive. And that miracle isn't waiting for you in some perfect future moment. It's here, now, in the very experience of reading these words, breathing this breath, existing as this conscious awareness that has never existed before and will never exist again. This is your one wild and precious life. Not the life you might have someday, but the life you're living right now. The question isn't how much time you have left. The question is how much life you're willing to put into the time that's already here.